everyone, welcome back to this week's edition of With All Due Respect. Hi, I'm Amanda Thebe. Today I am joined by Dr. Jenna Macciochi. Yay, I said her name right, and so I'm very proud of myself. But I'm also very excited that Jenna is on the show today. Jenna is coming to talk to us today about the immune system, and this is like a hot topic with COVID, of course. And she has a book that was released in February in the UK called Your Blueprint for Strong Immunity. And I found her via Instagram, and the reason that I'm so drawn to her is because all of the information that Dr. Jenna gives is so digestible. It's been such a confusing couple of years for us all, but every time you talk, Dr. Jenna, you always just give us like these really great pieces of advice that we can take away and action. And your book is like that as well. Your book is so easy to read. I was so happy that you sent me a copy. So I'll just tell you a little bit more about Dr. Jenna Macciochi. She specializes in understanding how nutrition and lifestyle interact with the immune system in health and disease. With over 20 years experience, she is on a mission to break down the science behind our health and share the secrets of how to be well for good. And you know, the whole longevity thing is my shtick as well. Like I'm forever like talking about, we're not just taking care of our health for right now, we're talking about like forever. And I love that that's your stance as well. So welcome.
Thanks for having me, Amanda. It's great to be here.
So, you know, what's interesting, first of all, is you're Scottish. And so I have to ask you about that. My husband's from Neilston, just outside Glasgow. And I feel like, is that what I'm hearing? Like a West Coast?
Yeah, well, West Coast. So yeah, West Coast probably sound more similar to outskirts of Glasgow, but I haven't lived there for such a long time.
Neither is he. Neither is he. In fact, it's really funny. He's completely anglicized his accent, and he'll say things like, we're in Canada now, and they'll say things like, is there any beer in the refrigerator? And I think it's because when you've got a strong Scottish accent, you do your best to be understood, right?
Yes, yeah. I mean, my husband's from, you know, the middle of London, so I've had to soften my accent a little bit. But we were in Scotland last week and my kids were like, Mummy, what's happened to you? You're sounding really funny talking to my parents and my family.
Yeah. You just go back. Same happens to us. So thank you for taking the time out of your super busy schedule to come on the podcast. I'm really happy to have you here. So your new book, it's all about like clearing up all of the nonsense around immunity, right? In my world, what I see, and I have like a nutritional science background, so I have a decent understanding, but not a very deep understanding about the immune system. And what I see all the time in my world and in the cesspit that can be social media sometimes is the idea that, you know, we can boost our immune system. And especially during COVID, that was a message that we were hearing a lot. So what I would love you to start with is, first of all, give us like your elevator pitch about what the immune system is in layman's terms. And then why the idea of boosting our immune system versus supporting our immune system is sort of like the wrong message, if you don't mind.
It's a great place to start. I think one of the first hurdles when we discuss the immune system is that we often think about it in the wrong way. It's often described as a kind of binary switch, you know, you can turn it on and turn it off whenever we please, or it's described as this kind of magical force that can be charged up to super strength with supplements, but it's a real complex system. It's like this complex dance of billions of different bits. There's different cells and subtypes of the cells, a whole complex web of different communication molecules like antibodies. Then we have organs, tissues, and even the microbes that live on us and in us. In my job, we consider them very much part of our immune system. So we've got this ecosystem of bacteria and other microbes that occupy different sites on our body. So it's really this whole complex system that's doing this choreography and collaborating with all the different parts to contribute to this overall harmony. And it's very much a sensing system. So it's connected to our brain and our neurobiology, because we need to prepare our immune system if we have some danger or some reason to think that our health might be at risk. So it's constantly translating things from how we think and feel. Most of our immune cells have receptors on them for, you know, the different neurochemicals. It's deeply connected to the stress axis, and it influences all the other systems in our body. So we know there's a close relationship with our metabolism, for example, as I mentioned, the microbes and the microbiome, and then things like how much body fat and muscle we have on our body. All of these things are all shaping our immune system. So I think that, you know, we can't oversimplify it. It's great to break down the science, but I would always encourage people to put a critical hat on if they see information that's making the immune system out to be extremely simple, and that it can be boosted by eating just 5 simple foods, for example. So it's much more involved than that. And we've definitely seen a lot of what I call immunity washing. So, you know, greenwashing is where efforts are made to market something as environmentally friendly rather than actually minimizing the environmental impact. So immune boosting is kind of the same thing. And with COVID, we've seen loads of products and brands everywhere slap immune boosting on their product just because it happens to, you know, be fortified with a vitamin that's been linked to immune function, for example.
Right. So it's like, it's this oversimplification that probably the general population can't disseminate, and we don't understand the complexities of it. So the idea that we can potentially boost something sounds appealing, but it's my understanding, and I'd really like to understand this more, that obviously boosting an immune system is somewhere we never want to go to. Like the idea of that would be problematic, yet supporting our immune system is the place we need to be. Can you sort of describe the difference, if that's possible?
Yeah, exactly. So, you know, if we think about when we get an infection, so some of us might have been unfortunate enough to have had COVID or some other sort of seasonal allergy over the last few years, and, you know, you start to get those feelings of being unwell, and that's normally the majority of those symptoms are caused by your immune system trying to make your body a hostile place for that germ. So it's got all these different weapons that actually can induce a bit of collateral damage on our own cells and tissues as they try and fight off these germs. So you kind of don't want that to go overboard. And indeed, with COVID, we saw that some people who got hospitalized, it was actually because of their immune system overshooting. So their immune system was too boosted in its response. And when we look at the way the immune system is designed, we can see that actually half of the immune system turns the other half off. So as soon as you get inflammation and you start feeling unwell, there's certain regulatory processes that come into play that are trying to steer that immune response so it can adequately remove the germ, but without causing your body too much damage, and then switch it all off at the end and, you know, take you back to normal.
That's incredibly fascinating. Oh my goodness, like the idea that it's so intuitive and intelligent for that to happen. I also love the fact that you use the word allergy, and you know, I talk, you're an immunologist and you said allergy, it makes me funny, and I'm wondering if people listening, I'm over here in North America, will be like, what the hell's allergy? And you know, when I used to get sick, I'd go, oh my god, I've got the dreaded allergy. And it just means to be have a
some routine illness that's doing the rounds. And
yeah, I'm sure there's an etymology behind that. I'm sure that actually comes from like Victorian England or something, right?
I'm going to have to look into that now. I'm curious. But I think that the other point that's important to make is that, you know, we evolved as a species, the human species, in a world that's full of germs. That's why we have an immune system. Throughout evolution, you know, we're always under attack by germs who want to find a nice cozy niche inside our body. And so we developed all these different cells and components of our immune system to fight that off. So getting sick every now and again is actually quite normal. And I think we've sort of moved to this era where, you know, we we don't want to be sick ever. And I always say to people, well, if you at all interact with other humans, there's a chance of spreading germs. And every now and again, no matter how healthy you are, no matter that you're doing everything right, one of those germs might just get in and cause you symptoms for a few days. But the bigger picture of how frequently you get ill, how long it takes you to recover, those kind of things are important sort of red flags if something was really wrong with your health.
It's and it's interesting because you know, we've both got children, and it sort of reminds me a little bit of like letting the kids get outside and get dirty and stuff like that, and then all of these helicopter parents like sanitizing their kids' hands, and I'm like, I think it's okay for them to like eat a bit of dirt now and again. Like,
yes, and in fact, you know, we often say, oh, you know, I've heard parents say, oh, letting your kids get infections helps build their immunity, but actually the good germs in natural environments, digging in the dirt, playing in nature, those are the ones that we've actually now realized are giving the signals to develop our immune system. And there's studies where they put daycare kids to have more time in nature, digging in dirt, playing in gardens, and they found measurable improvements in their immune function over time, even if they didn't change anything else.
Oh my goodness, so that's fascinating, and that's sort of a little bit of an old wives' tale that's sort of come true then. I love that. You know, I want to like just push that conversation a little bit more, and I don't want this all to be about me, but in 2020 when I was living in Texas, so it's no surprise that I got COVID. You know, everywhere it was, I just sort of become aware of COVID, and I'm super careful. I'm a rule follower, but I still got what we think was COVID. I never had any positive tests, just positive diagnosis, because at the time we didn't really have anything in place. And it wasn't a very nice experience for about 2 weeks, but it was fine. But then I had 17 weeks of long COVID.
Right.
And what was really interesting, and sort of like the point of me telling you that, is because a couple of things happened. Is, well, first of all of my doctors recognized that I had some type of post-viral syndrome. They didn't have a name for it, but they could see that I clearly wasn't recovering. The second part of it was, I felt as though my body had let me down because I was fit and healthy. And part of my whole thing is like, I really take care of myself, body, mind, soul, the whole thing. And so I just was like, what am I doing wrong? And so I think I'd like to touch on that. Like, so why does something like long COVID or post-viral syndrome happen? And why are some people just finding it so much harder to recover than others? And why is it not their fault? Because
I think I can really empathize with you. And I do feel like, especially as a healthcare professional who is on social media and writes books for the general public, I always feel I have to tread a very delicate line, because on the one hand, people want really short, snappy, actionable pieces of information, but on the other hand, they might be doing all those things and then they get ill anyway. And I talk to a lot of people with allergies, autoimmune disease, and they say, oh, I did everything right. Why did it happen to me? And I think that there's an element of all of biology that we just don't understand, that is random. There's things perhaps going on under the hood of our body that we don't know unless we go and thoroughly get checked out. And one of the things I've been exploring recently is that we don't have very many good tools to measure comprehensively every aspect of your immune system. So if we don't know what your immune system was doing before you got ill, it's hard to say if there was something there that, you know, could have been tweaked or improved. Then there's the genetics that come into it. And what a big part of it is I think that viruses cause us a lot of sort of oxidative stress. So the type of immune response that we're mounting to that virus really sort of sucks up all the antioxidants in our body. It depletes a lot of nutrient levels, and we incur a little bit of this kind of collateral damage due to all this inflammation that's going on. And I think in different people that might just take a bit longer to restore. And I think that we don't know enough from the scientific evidence of what really targeted interventions to give in that post-viral period. So we're so used to people just getting over a viral infection and they're more or less back to normal, but not quite right. And there's not really evidence to say, okay, they could do with like increased supplementation with key nutrients during that period. You know, things like vitamin C, our levels really drop during the infection. And we might, our appetite might be affected. Many people had sense and smell and taste changes happening with COVID. Your energy levels might be affected, so your ability to look after yourself, you know, all this kind of trickle down effect. And I think often for a lot of people, maybe we were, you know, running on empty before we go into an illness. I'm not saying this was the case for you, but I know, for example, I find it hard to take my own advice because I work, I've got kids, there's always things to do, there's never, you know, and I think modern life is quite hard on us generally, and so we're all kind of fighting that anyway, and then a virus comes along and knocks us for six, and it just takes us that bit longer to get back. But I do think how you go into an illness can help with how you come out of an illness. So hopefully your long COVID experience kind of didn't linger too long.
Yeah, it was longer than I expected, but I was in the support group with like hundreds of thousands of them, and I know some people are still sick, and you know, it's essentially I threw everything at getting better. And one of the best pieces of advice I got was from an NHS website from Bristol that said about working within an energy envelope, because it's one of those A-type personalities. I was like, feel good today, I'm going to go for like a 10k walk, and then I would be like back in bed for 2 weeks. And so I started pulling back and just doing things slowly and carefully, and it definitely helped me.
Exactly. I think that, you know, if you go back into your normal routines too quickly, then you're just not quite there yet, and it can set you back all the further.
Yeah, and so that's actually a really good segue into your book and how you talk about just actually supporting like immunity in the body. And there's so many places we can go with this, and there's not as very much time, but some of the areas I'd love you to talk about are like nutrition, metabolic health, and exercise, and just general things that we can do to keep our stress levels in check, to support our body, because that ties in so much with my work that I do in that message. And I just really like to know sort of like your take on all of that, please.
Yeah, I think I went into this book thinking I need to write the book that I need to read, because as I said,
always a great place to start, right? Yeah.
I find it really hard sometimes to put the knowledge into action, to apply the theory to my life. So I came at the book with a lot of compassion for other people who might feel that way. And I also really wanted to talk about how to develop the habits that make things consistent, because consistency, I think, is kind of like the foundation to getting there. You know, the little is often.
Yeah.
And then I was sort of thinking, well, how do I try and get things to be consistent in my life? And so the sort of beginning of the chapter goes into that a little bit. And then I broke down what we can control and what we can't control about our immune function, because I think people do oversimplify it, and it's like if you just eat a certain way you'll be invincible, but there's really kind of like a few pillars where we have influence, and then there's the other stuff like what happened in our past, and you know, our genetics, and you know, hereditary things that we cannot change. So in terms of the levers that we can tug on, diet is the obvious one, but I wanted to really talk not just about, you know, what foods to eat, but your relationship to food, because most of us kind of know what to eat. But the problem is we come home from a bad day after work and we will just stand there with the fridge open, you know, eating the ice cream, deciding what to cook, and then we actually never cook anything. So it's kind of like thinking about why you might not necessarily nourish your body. It's not because you don't, you know, you're not hungry for that. It's often like emotional stuff and stress, you know, and all those other kind of complicated psychosocial issues. And once we can sort of get a handle on that, we can have a pause and then think, well, that's going to lead to like a cycle where we're going to feel bad about ourselves. What happens if we just try and, you know, bring in a few really of these fundamentally healthy food groups? And then I detail a lot about what, you know, what constitutes a real immune nourishing diet. And people might be surprised because most of the evidence speaks to the pattern of foods you habitually eat most of the time. So that means not that you just had this really, you know, indulgent, hyper processed meal today, but what have you eaten across the week? Have you got in plenty of like green leafy vegetables, fiber sources from different plants, diversity of fruit and vegetables, you know, bringing up the flavor with herbs and spices and all that kind of thing, good protein sources and healthy fats. And that's what the main pattern should be. Maybe on the weekend you go out with friends and you know, eat whatever you like and you don't consider anything about how that's nourishing you, and that's also okay, because it's
okay because you're talking about big picture, not one specific meal. And that sort of falls into the conversation about so many things, about, you know, just how we talk about our body, how we punish ourselves, about our relationships with food. And I love that you've gone there in your book. I mean, I spent some time talking in my book about how to eat, not just what to eat as well. And the how to eat is, you know, how we eat with our family and our relationship with food, actually understanding when we're hungry and being more mindful about when to eat rather than mindlessly eating. And so I love that our paths have crossed with that message, because it just goes to show that the processes that we do and the actions we take impact all areas of the body, right?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And sometimes having that really processed meal, but having it with your best friend and laughing and, you know, doing something fun together and having a break from work, that can really nurture your emotional well-being and your social well-being, which we know is connected to your immunological well-being. So everything kind of has a place. And I never want people to just put all their money on getting the right diet to feel well. It's got to be about tweaking all these different levers just a little bit every day that will slowly get you where you need to be.
And I love that you called it influences that we can have, rather than being, because the words that we use when we talk about our health really matter. And it's one of the big bugbears that I've got just in health and wellness. And I know that you talked about the microbiome, and it really frustrates me at the moment, the amount of like gut diets that there are, gut diet protocols where women are typically women, and it's usually targeted at us, are encouraged to like eliminate foods and food groups and I'm just like, why? We don't have to do that. In fact, the way to like approach health is always to add stuff, never to restrict stuff, right? It's always like, what can I add that's going to benefit my health? And I love that you go there too. You're like, it's not the way you need to eat, and it's actually quite harmful, the knock-on effects of restriction and elimination on our overall emotional well-being.
Definitely, yeah. No, I 100% agree.
So you talked about the oxidative stress, like just how, like, you know, that can like impact our like response to like viruses and stuff. And so in your book, you talk about the immune brain connection. You talk about sleep and stress management. I think that's often overlooked in the immunity conversation, right?
Yes, definitely. And I mean, I feel like food is always the go-to because it's kind of more tangible for people, and supplements, people investing money and buying things kind of makes them feel like they have agency over their health. But I just think there's no back door to immune well-being. You can't sort of get around or fast track your way to being invincible just by spending money on some supplements and eating healthy. You have to really look at the other aspects that are giving these vital inputs into the immune system. And exercise is a huge one. There's like such a long list of benefits of, you know, what exercise, or as I call it, movement, because I just want people to move more. You know, it's moving that lymphatic fluid around your body. And this is a system of vessels, a bit like your blood vessels. But unlike the blood circulatory system, it doesn't have the heart pump the fluid around. So it's only moving around if you're moving around. So you need to be getting up and moving as much as possible during the day. And that is moving your immune cells around the body. They're doing a bit of a surveillance function, making sure that they can catch out anything untoward as soon as it tries to invade your body. And the lymphatic system also drains away the sort of waste products from all of your cells, the day-to-day running of your body, and takes all that away to be removed with the stool and the urine and sweat, etc. So you need to be moving just for the lymph system to be working. If you're not moving, it's not working. And equally with sleep, the lymphatics that connect to the brain are only really active while you're sleeping. So in order to clear out the metabolic waste of the brain and for the immune system in the brain to function healthily, you need to be getting that good sleep. And then with exercise, I mean, I think, I don't know, I feel like I had this whole kind of moment when I was researching the book, and I was like, humans are just not meant to exercise, are we? We're like, my happiest, healthiest points in my life are when I'm not at work. So now I'll just be pottering about all day, and I'll get to the end of the day and I've done like 20,000 steps, and I feel really good because I probably associate that with being outdoors as well. So you're getting the benefits of the daylight and everything. And then I've just been on holiday for 2 weeks. I've come back and today's like a day at my desk. Honestly, I've been at my desk since 8 o'clock. It's terrible. It's now like 3:30 in the afternoon. And so I really understand that we have to work hard to engineer our day to move. And actually, you know, if I was to go to the gym tonight or go for a run tonight, it doesn't negate the amount of sitting that I've done across the day. So that's a separate risk factor. So even if you're healthy, you know, you go running, you go to the gym, you know, you have an evening stroll, whatever it is, if you've sat for 5, 6, 7 hours without moving, that exercise isn't undoing the sitting, unfortunately. So we do need to be breaking the sitting up, and I've tried to be getting better at little snacks of exercise in between.
Yes, that's what I call it, movement snacking. Exactly.
Right? I've got my skipping ropes over there, or pick up a kettlebell. My husband does it too, so that makes it a little bit easier for both working at home, because I'll be like, oh, he's doing his little set, so I'll join in. And then
I sort of sorry, I thought you'd finished. I was just going to say, I have like a kettlebell in the kitchen, and I'll do like 10 or 15 swings every now and again, because I just think I have the whole all or something mentality, you know, like something is better than nothing, and it doesn't matter how small that something is. But the idea of like sitting all day, I also makes you agitated. There's something good about the way it makes you feel, right?
Yes. Yeah. It doesn't make anyone feel good at all. And I think that, you know, before having kids, I had the luxury of more flexibility in my schedule. But since having kids, like if I didn't do like little 10-minute things of, you know, like picking up a kettlebell, like you said, or just grabbing a skipping rope, then I probably would never get to the gym. And then I would always be saying, well, next week, because with kids and work, the schedule can be really crazy sometimes. So particularly when we went into the first lockdown and all the gyms closed, I was like, you know, I've never been one for working out at home, but now I don't have a choice. So I'm going to get up every day and start that little habit until it's so ingrained that I just get up and do it. And sometimes I just sit and do some stretching. Sometimes I do a full-on workout, but I've definitely just a tiny little bit of kit in your house, rolling out your mat, getting your gym stuff on. And if you've got
to be complicated, and it doesn't need to be complicated. And you know, the other thing I would say about that is just knowing, like working with behavioral changes, that like when people start something, if you miss a couple of days, it doesn't mean you go back to zero. You can just pick up and keep going, because that's how habits work. You're going to fall, you're going to get back up, and that's normal. To the point where it becomes something that is automatic. Sorry, you just want to do it, right? Can I ask a quick question? Because as we come towards the end of the interview, I want to talk about menopause, and only in the fact that I wonder how much of an impact our falling estrogen, or, you know, receding estrogen has on our immunity. And because when I was in the long COVID situation, it was the first time anything like that had ever happened to me. I'm definitely that person that's like Typhoid Mary that gets stuff. It just is me. But the way that this stuck around, and I just like was looking out of curiosity to like how many women within that like 40s, 50s age range were struggling. Is there any connection that you can think of?
Yes, definitely. And we know that the sex hormones, so estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone, all have their receptors on our immune cells. So we know that the whole immune system is highly influenced by what these sex hormones are doing in the body. And we see that even in women before entering the menopause, that the immune function changes slightly across the menstrual cycle. So very subtly, we know there can be shifts during pregnancy. So people with certain conditions might see a flare up or things dying down or changing, and even in the postnatal period as well. So we've known for a long time that there's this interplay between the hormones, the sex hormones, and the immune system. And we also know that men tend to do worse with infections. So that was known before COVID, but we certainly saw with COVID that men tended to be the ones who were getting more severe infection or being hospitalized. So women, we have a much stronger response to infection compared to men. And that's because our immune systems are different, because our sex hormones are different. And estrogen is like a real key player in this. So it's very apparent that there's this link, but it hasn't been well studied, like many things with women's health. We kind of have a few statistics, you know, that 80% of people with autoimmune diseases are women, and, you know, man flu is real and that kind of thing. But we haven't, I guess COVID has really sort of brought it to the limelight, and it does seem that estrogen could have a protective effect against infection. So the sex hormones are one aspect, and there may be other aspects like genetics, but estrogen seems to be particularly important in the antiviral immune response. And this has been seen in the studies with COVID. And also when people go through the menopause and their estrogen levels start to drop off, we see their risk go to the same as that of men for getting severe disease.
So but we get man flu.
Exactly, unfortunately. But it means that people who are taking hormone replacement therapy, that risk doesn't happen, so they're protected while they're on the therapy. So
yeah,
you go
very interesting, isn't it? Yeah, very interesting. I'd love,
oh sorry,
I was going to say I'd love like more digging for that around that area to happen for sure.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of interest. I don't know if you're aware of Professor Louise Newson. I'm on her committee that she's formed, sort of doing a lot of work in this area, and it's great that the conversation is there and happening, because then we can, you know, help support women during that phase to protect them from various health risks, if we do have the sort of tools and treatments and the evidence base to do so.
You know, what's interesting about that conversation is because we obviously know about the menopause transition or perimenopause being like that, like heightened risk for so many things, because as the body goes into that adjustment phase. Mm-hmm. But there's so much evidence as well to show that post-menopause, how there's like an equilibrium that happens in the body, that our bodies are very capable of living with these reduced sex hormones, our brain readjusts. And mm-hmm. I know that I'm now 3 years post-menopause, and I don't feel anywhere as like in this like quagmire as I did in perimenopause. I do feel as though things have just calmed right down. And I wonder if that also would happen for the immune response as well, because, you know, I think women get a little bit scared thinking, oh my God, I'm going to lose my estrogen, so therefore I'm going to get disease ridden and I'm going to get really sick. And I don't believe that that's to be accurate either.
Yeah, it's a really interesting point. And I think there's a lot of conversation around support with different hormone replacement treatments. But I guess, you know, there's also the other argument to look at, well, you know, after a certain period of time, if the body adjusts, what does that look like then in terms of risk? Because you do hear these statistics get thrown around that do sound really scary. I think, you know, are we medicalizing the menopause almost as well? It's complicated. It's complicated.
And I think the only reason I bring it up is because, you know, I know the conversation in North America is not as pro HRT. It's definitely like HRT is part of the treatment option, and it must be included in the conversation for those that need it. But there's also the conversation that not everyone can take it, not everybody does well on it, and not everybody needs it. And so I definitely try and always do full picture conversations rather than, you know, And I sometimes think that gets missed a little bit, like when in the UK, and I'm trying not to throw stones here, I'm just trying to sort of say, like, as an observer, I just think, it's interesting.
No, I've heard a few people also discuss this, and what I think is perhaps lacking is, well, maybe in the UK, I've many friends who've had negative experiences when they've gone to the GP because perhaps the GP hasn't had, I think you need to almost have a special interest in women's health and maybe go and do some more training in order to be able to provide the comprehensive discussion that would be needed for an individual person who was contemplating a variety of different routes during perimenopause. And I think maybe that's what is missing, is that
I have to say that I see that, and that happens here too. I also think it's improving. I honestly think the amount of awareness that's happened in the UK, Canada, North America, like I can see the momentum is getting better. So hopefully, fingers crossed, women will get the support they need, whatever that looks like for those as an individual. So as we come to the end of the conversation, I've really enjoyed speaking to you. I wanted to know if you could sort of impart some wisdom for us, like, so as women, like moving forward with our health, and I know longevity is a big part of the conversation for you. What's some small things we can do just to support ourselves moving forward?
Oh, well, probably the biggest thing I would give to, particularly to women, particularly to anyone, you know, in the 30s and onwards, and that might seem quite young, is look after your muscles. It's so important, and we if we don't use it, we lose it, because it is an expensive tissue for our body to hold on to, and it's also an immunologically active tissue. And we often talk about, you know, body mass index and obesity and how these are inflammatory conditions and bad for our health, but is it the amount of fat someone's carrying it, or is it also the reduced muscle that they're carrying? And it seems that there's an emerging picture whereby it's not just about the amount of body fat, but it's also about the proportion of muscle mass that you have. And so I know a lot of women my age and slightly older who grew up in that era where, you know, you exercise to burn calories, it's cardio, 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 and the older you get, the more benefit you can get from stopping some of that cardio, lifting some weights and doing some resistance work twice a week. And that's in the government
speaking my speak. You're talking my talk. I love it. And you've actually enlightened me, because I didn't I like know so many reasons to lift weights. I never knew there was an immune component to it either.
Yeah.
So wow.
And it's one of the biggest inputs to how well your immune system ages. So as we mentioned in our conversation, people who are older tend to do worse with COVID, but your immunological age isn't the same as your chronological age. So there's studies showing that you've got sedentary, unhealthy 20-somethings who have an immunological age much older than their actual age, or you have 70-year-olds who are very fit and active, and they have an immunological age much younger. And so you can imagine the different outcomes if they got an infection, for example. But the muscles, when we use them, they're producing particular chemicals that seem to rejuvenate certain aspects of our immune system, like this gland in our neck called the thymus gland. So it's getting rid of the old, supporting the new. So yeah, muscle mass and immune aging, it's like, that's, you know, that would be the biggest thing I would say to people to focus on.
Oh, what a wonderful way to end. Yeah, that's amazing. Like just how cool that is. And they're practical things that we can do ourselves, right? Yeah,
exactly. And I, you know, in your work, that what you're doing, I think is a great way to sort of inspire people if they've never lifted a weight, or, you know, don't even know what resistance training means. It's just, you know, getting a way to explore that feels comfortable, particularly for women of a certain age. You might not want to walk into a gym or have a personal trainer who's some young 27-year-old guy. Can I do one more? Is there
who doesn't get us? Who doesn't get us at all? Yeah, for sure. Of course you can. I could talk to you all day.
The other one that I think is like the secret sauce that I wish that they taught in schools, and I wish I learned about this sooner, it would be self-compassion. So just being kind to yourself, because there's actual scientific studies showing that when people are taught to be kind to themselves and, you know, consider that that voice that they, in the way they talk to themselves, that is actually associated with improvements in immune function, and they can, you know, measure this in the blood. So I think it's a message for all of us. I've spent many years having an inner critic that was louder than the compassionate one, and I'm sure many people can relate to that. But I think, you know, being compassionate is going to get you much further. You know, feeling bad about yourself because you didn't set out what you wanted to this week, you didn't eat the way you wanted to or work out the way you wanted to, it's not really a tool to motivate you to go and achieve what you might want to set out to do. But being compassionate with yourself can certainly help facilitate getting you there in a much kinder way.
That's amazing. I also didn't appreciate that, but that's a message that I definitely try and carry on, because we've got this ingrained message culturally that we have to be thin and young and we have to punish ourselves to get where we need to be. And I'm fighting back against that all the time, but because it's ingrained, it's a work in progress. I even posted the other day that I was in the kitchen and my jeans were feeling a bit snugger than I wanted to. And I said out loud, and I regretted it straight away, I went, oh, my butt's feeling too meaty today. And my son, who I've always been careful to talk around, because boys have body image issues too, of course, turned around and said, people pay a lot of money for that, Mum, you own it, it looks great. And I just was like, oh my God, thank God for bringing me back. Like, thank God for like people like who are around us that are like changing the narrative. It's so important. So anyway, like Dr. Jenna, so how, if we want to find you, can we, and where can we get your book? So I think this book's such a great addition to our library.
Thank you. You can mostly find me on Instagram. It's my name, Dr. Jenna Macciochi, Macciochi. I'm on Twitter occasionally, a bit more of an academic over there, Dr. J Mac, MACC, and then my website, which is again just my name. If you Google my name, you will find all these things. And yeah, the book, this is my copy here. This one is available most places you can buy books, I guess. Book Depository ship worldwide, I know that, but you can also get it on Amazon and perhaps some smaller booksellers as well.
You'll probably get it on an ebook as well, I would suspect, on Kindle and ebooks as well. So
yeah, and I recorded, I did the audio book. So
I didn't do the audio for mine. I couldn't fly because of COVID, so it's somebody else doing it that's not English, and it sounds really odd, but it's better. Your voice, I could listen to it all day long, of course, because I've got Scottish in my family and I really like it. But I'll make sure to link to all of those places so people can come back to you. Thank you for taking the time today. It was enlightening. It was so great to just have everything just like spelled out to us in a way that's palatable, that's not ultra confusing. And thank you for all the work you're doing.
No problem. Thanks for having me. It's been great.
Okay, thanks. Bye, everyone. Till next time. Take care. Bye.